So this feels really weird. I'm so used to sitting down in front of this computer and typing and trying something a little bit different today, sitting down in front of the same computer and speaking instead of writing. And I decided to do this after my latest TV appearance with Karma's a Bitch. Hope you had a chance to check it out. I think they did a great job capturing the story. It was really weird seeing somebody act it out. It was kind of like an out-of-body experience almost watching it, and they got a lot of stuff right. Some things not quite so right. Just for the record, I didn't keep calling him an SOB as I was discovering everything. A little more in shock than that, I guess. But part of the nature of television is they couldn't show everything. They had to edit it down. And as I was watching it, I found that there was a lot of the story that I wanted to get out there that didn't quite make it into that format. So I thought I'd do it myself. So I'm just going to start today kind of by telling a little bit of the story and how I ended up where I'm at and how Lessons from the End of a Marriage even came about. So it all happened about 5 years ago. In fact, it'll be 5 years in just a few weeks. And that summer I'd made a decision to go visit my dad, who lives out in Seattle. And I hadn't been there in many years. And I was actually kind of nervous about the trip, just didn't know my dad very well and was sort of anxious about getting to see him. And one of the moments I'll never forget, my husband at the time took me to the airport, and he didn't just drop me off, he walked in with me. And he held me right in front of that sign that says what's prohibited on the plane, and held me close and said, "Don't worry, you'll be back before you know it. It's just a week." He gave me a great hug, great kiss. And what I didn't realize was he really was saying goodbye. So I went to Seattle and was having a great trip with my dad. My worries were unfounded. And throughout that whole time, I was in contact with my husband. We were texting and talking on the phone for probably about an hour each day. And everything was completely normal. The love you, miss you. We were talking about a trip we were going to do to the Georgia coast the next weekend when I got home. And, it was just, everything was good. And then it wasn't. After receiving a text that said, "Love you, miss you, can't wait to get home," only a few hours later I received a text that said, "I'm sorry to be such a coward leaving you this way, but I'm leaving you and leaving the state." And that was the last that I ever heard from my husband again. After 16 years together, it all ended with a text message. I tried calling him, I tried texting him, email, whatever I could, and I got no response. And my dad, the man that I hadn't felt close to and I felt nervous about seeing again, he was amazing. As I say, in that instant, I lost a husband, but I gained a father. As soon as I read that text, I collapsed to the floor, curled into a fetal position. And my dad, I held the phone out to him so he could see it. And then he came to the ground with me, wrapped his body around mine, and just held me. And then when he could, he got on the phone and he started making phone calls. And one of the first calls he made was to my mom, who lives in Texas. And we were trying to figure out if the dogs were okay. We had 3 dogs and a cat at the time. And my mom knew a number of a good friend of mine back in Atlanta. And so she called that friend and made arrangements for the friend to go check on the dogs. Meanwhile, my dad got on the phone with his wife and was trying to arrange transportation back to Atlanta. So we got on a plane together, he was with me, and traveled all the way across the country to the ruins of the life that I had. And it was ruined. Walked into the house. It was the next morning until we made it there. And there were just weird, it was so strange. There were certain details that had been taken care of. The dishwasher had been unloaded. My clothes had been folded and put away. But my husband's office was empty. And there was a letter on the kitchen counter. A typed, unsigned letter. A few paragraphs that really said nothing. Just excuses, no real information. The dogs were okay. The friend had checked on them. They'd been left alone, though, for a couple days. I really think he left them to die, and the only reason he sent the text is because he felt guilty about them. But I don't know. You know, it's weird what we do in times of extreme stress and crisis. One of the first things I did when I got to the house is I started packing up his belongings that were left with the intent to take them to Goodwill. I don't know why. It was completely nonsense. But it was a Sunday, so we couldn't call attorneys or anything else. And I just needed to do something. I needed action. Because I understood that the marriage was over. That there was no way. I didn't know what was going on. But no contact made it pretty clear that whatever was happening, it was done. So later that night, couldn't sleep, go figure. Got on the computer and started looking at the accounts. I had suspicions that something might be going on with the money because he had taken all of our financial records with him. So I start to get into the accounts and discover that the login and password information had changed. One of the benefits of being with somebody for 16 years, especially since childhood, is you kind of know the answers to those questions. You know, I knew his mom's maiden name, I knew his high school mascot, you know, I knew enough information to be able to get in. And the first account I got into was our checking and savings accounts. And they were empty. Actually, worse than empty. Negative. Didn't even know you could do that. And that was just the beginning. I found credit cards that I didn't know existed, that were maxed out. I found a card in my name that I didn't think had any activity on it for years, with tens of thousands of dollars on it. And I had no idea where this money went. And started looking at some of the itemized deductions on some of the accounts that I could see. And I very quickly saw evidence of an affair. I could tell that on his recent business trip to Brazil, he was buying dinners not just for one person, but for two. And I saw jewelry purchases and things like that. And I wanted to know where the money went, because that didn't account for nearly enough. But I really, at that point, didn't care more about the affair. It didn't really answer any questions. It didn't really matter to me. So the next day, my dad and I, we started making some phone calls. Called an attorney. We were going to have to do divorce by publication since I had no idea where he was. It's a strange thought. I didn't even know you could divorce by just posting it in the newspaper. And as we were kind of researching things and everything else, I figured out that I could actually see the mail going into his junk email box. I don't even know why. I just know our accounts were linked. It was both through his business, and I could see just his junk email. So I started watching it, just looking for answers, because it still made no sense. You know, why this man telling me how much he loved me, you know, days ago, all of a sudden would disappear. I needed answers. I needed to know what happened. So I start watching the junk email, and, you know, most of it's just junk, you know, advertisements or receipts for iTunes music. I was buying a lot of music. But then I saw one email that wasn't junk. It was forwarded And it was sent to him by a woman whose name I didn't know. And the email referenced needing to get a visa to go on a trip to Uganda. And at that point, I think I laughed because I just could not picture him in Uganda. I mean, my husband was about as preppy as you could get. He, always wore Banana Republic. His watch had to be just so. Was very particular about his car. We'd been on a trip to Jamaica a couple of years prior to that, and he was so nervous being out of the country and everything else. And now he was going to Uganda. And why Uganda? What's there? And so that email was interesting. It gave me some information. Not only that he was planning on leaving the country, but it also gave me a little more information of where he was, and it gave me what I expected was the other woman's name. And so, I'm still looking for information, so I do some research on her, and it tells me a little bit, but it still doesn't answer the question of why. But the next email sort of did. So a little while later, I intercept another email. And it was from a band. The band had emailed that other woman, and then she forwarded it to him, to my husband. And the band was upset because they had not yet received the check for playing the wedding. Yes, that's right. My husband got married.